have roughly everyone will have roughly 5 minutes to introduce their work and to answer to some questions. And then after we all had these 5 minutes, then we will go to more general questions that everyone can basically jump in and answer. So please, to the audience, if you have questions, write them in the chat and we will read them and ask them to the panelists. So I think we can get started. We have already 70 participants. Still more people joining, but maybe we can wait another minute and then we kick off. Okay, I see that more people have joined. Fantastic. So welcome everyone to this 7th episode of the Planet Earthly webinar series. I'm Giacomo. I'm part of Earthly's research team. I work on origination, so creating new nature projects. And I'll be moderating this webinar today, and I'm very honored to introduce you to our panelists. I will introduce them one by one, so that you get to know them individually. So before getting into each of our panelists' questions, I wanted to introduce a bit the theme of nature positive. So nature positive is a term that has been gaining traction in the past few years, but it hasn't been really well defined in one unique way. Different organizations have taken their interpretation of the terms, but generally speaking, there is an agreement. There is like nature positive means enhancing the resilience of our planet and societies to halt and reverse nature loss. But also connected to this is also the concept of social progress and environmental protection. So it's not just about nature, so reversing nature loss and biodiversity gain, but it's also about doing that in harmony with people and like between people and the environment. So regenerative and nature positive economy is one that is regenerative and collaborative, where growth is only valued where it contributes to social progress and environmental protection. So there's a lot of terms these days coming up, and so you might wonder, how is this really different from the ones we've seen before? Like, how is it different, for instance, from carbon positive? Well, although the gain traction to basically carbon finance has brought a lot of benefits to scale investments in nature, really the focus on carbon has meant in some cases that people and biodiversity have taken a sort of secondary role in these investments. And so in the pictures here, you can actually see two examples of investment that would count as carbon positive, but are definitely not what we would want to call nature positive. So on the right-hand side, you can see an event where some representatives from native indigenous communities complain publicly about the land tenure right issues arising from a lack of engagement with communities in these carbon-focused investment. And on the left-hand side, you can see an example of a project that focuses exclusively on carbon benefit, and by doing that actually has a net negative impact on biodiversity. What you can see on the right-hand side of that picture is a native Brazilian rainforest. And on the left, you can see that the project developers have basically replanted the forest, but using only one species that is not from Brazil. And by doing so, they have harmed biodiversity in quite irreversible ways. So why nature positive? Because we want to direct investment and scale investment in a way that is both delivering climate benefits, so capturing carbon, but at the same time also benefiting communities and helping us basically address the biodiversity crisis that we are seeing, which is interlinked with the climate crisis. So if we can go to the next slide, I would like to introduce you to Oliver Bolton, our CEO and founder. So Oliver is a climate tech entrepreneur. He founded Earthly a couple of years ago, and he's passionate about reversing climate breakdown, restoring a planet, and leaving a better Earth for future generations. That's actually why he started Earthly. He's an active B Corp ambassador and enjoys mentoring school children through the Prince Trust. So Oliver, thank you for being here. And I was wondering if you could introduce us to Earthly's work and the work we've done so far in supporting businesses wanting to become nature positive.
Thanks, Giacomo. Appreciate the intro. So if we head to the next slide, we are really proud at Earthly to now be supporting over 500 businesses around the world invest into nature, including Laura from Evolve, who's kindly with us here today. And I think what's really exciting is we're seeing this trend from the businesses that we work with to go above and beyond net zero. And more companies are coming to us looking to embed nature investments into their business that aren't necessarily connected to a footprint, because they want to give back more to the world than they need to take, to exist. And so, this is a trend that we're really proud to be supporting and, helping the regenerative business leaders of tomorrow invest into the highest quality projects. We're also really proud to be backed financially and as a strategic partner with Google, who we've been working with for the last 2 years. And if we go to the next slide, we have really spent the last 18 months digging into the project assessment side of things. And through our research team, with advice from our scientific board, which includes PJ, who's kindly also with us here today on the webinar, we've developed a scoring system that looks across carbon, biodiversity, and social impact from nature-based projects. So it's a really holistic approach. Essentially takes in 106 different data points, and we only work with projects that meet minimum standards across all of those data points. And on the next slide, we can see a kind of spread across people, carbon, and biodiversity of some of those key indicators that we're tracking. Some of the data comes from public sources like project documentation. Some of the data comes from proprietary sources and partnerships with the likes of B0 and Google, where we have our partnership to Google Earth Engine. And ultimately we want to make sure that money is, the money that is going to nature is going to the most impactful projects that are going to survive and thrive in the decades to come. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Ollie. And yeah, it's really great to see actually the exponentially increasing interest from potential investors in nature like Laura, and to see that there's so many companies that are really putting all their efforts to drive quality in this emerging market. So let me introduce you now to PJ Stephenson. He's member of the Earthly Scientific Board, and we're very proud to have him. And he's the chair of IUCN's Species Monitoring Specialist Group and a research fellow at the University of Lausanne. He's also an independent conservation and sustainability consultant, and he's gonna help us add more context on what nature positive action is and why is it needed based on the evidence we have for nature decline and biodiversity loss, and what is the potential for nature positive to really drive value both to nature and businesses. So nice to have you here, PJ.
Thank you, Giacomo. So I'm just going to speak. I'm not going to show any slides. So I apologize if you're going to be stuck with a picture of me for 5 minutes, or maybe you can look at a different angle of the screen. Anyway, let me basically start by being very clear about why we need to talk of nature positive. So the World Economic Forum estimates that nature contributes up to 150 trillion US dollars to the world's economy. Now that's a huge amount, and the importance is already evident in a number of business sectors. I mean, as you all know, many companies depend on animals and plants for their raw materials, such as trees for wood or fungi for fermentation. Many others rely on ecosystem services, such as the provision of fresh water or healthy soils or the pollination of plants. These dependencies, though, mean that any risks to biodiversity represent clear and obvious risks to business. And that at the moment should be a big worry because, put quite simply, our planet is in a very desperate state. The United Nations Environment Programme says we're facing a triple planetary crisis of nature loss, climate change, and pollution. And let me just quickly share with you a few facts and figures that back that up. The Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services says that habitats and ecosystems are being lost, degraded, and polluted at an alarming rate. And the sorts of figures they cite, FAO data shows that since 2015, we've been losing 10 million hectares of forest around the world every year. That's an area the size of Iceland or 2.5 times the size of Switzerland. Marine plastic pollution has increased tenfold since 1980. Now, WWF and the Zoological Society of London say that since 1970, vertebrate populations worldwide have declined by 68%. IUCN shows that 40,000 species worldwide are threatened with extinction. And given how little we know about plants, fungi, and invertebrates, that figure is probably much higher, possibly even as high as 1 million species at risk. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says that human activity over the last 200 years has led to a global temperature rise of 1.1 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Now, that may not sound like a lot, but you have to remember that with every increment of warming comes more extreme weather events. Therefore, basically, as made clear by the Ecological Footprint Network, human impacts on the environment are out of control. And we basically now need 1.75 planet Earths to survive at our current consumption rates. Now, the fact that we don't have a second planet means we have to do something, right? So what do we do? Well, the Convention on Biological Diversity, the CBD, has made the urgency very clear, and it recently set a global goal to substantially increase the area of natural ecosystems by 2050. Now, the key thing here is increase. They're committing to increase the area of natural ecosystems. And that includes restoring 30% of the degraded areas on our planet and protecting 30% of our land and our seas. So what's the relevance to business? Well, everyone needs to act. This is not just a job for governments and environmental NGOs. Everybody has to act. And for the first time, the CBD actually has a specific target aimed at the corporate sector with the aim of increasing its positive impacts. Now, historically, concerned companies have responded to environmental concerns by implementing the mitigation hierarchy, and many have used that to strive for no net loss of biodiversity or net zero. But this is no longer going to be enough if we're going to meet the CBD's targets. Unless we all make an effort to improve the state of nature, we're going to still be in trouble. So what that means is that companies will increasingly want to, need to, or be legally obliged to be more sustainable and nature-friendly in their operations and supply chains, and aim for net gains in biodiversity. And this is basically what nature positive is. It's striving for more nature than we have now. So what does that mean in practice for businesses? Well, there's many actions they can take to mitigate their impacts and promote biodiversity. They can choose raw materials from verified or sustainable, certified sustainable sources. They can employ circular economy strategies like recycling and reusing. They can use machinery that creates less noise and pollution. They can avoid sites with threatened species or threatened habitats. There's also a growing trend for companies to adopt and invest in nature-based solutions. These are actions to protect and restore ecosystems in ways that also provide human well-being benefits. Now, nature-based solutions are also very diverse. I don't have time to go into them in detail now, but examples include initiatives to protect habitats that are strongholds for carbon and biodiversity, restore degraded landscapes to improve those essential ecosystem services like water provision and soil health, and apply sustainable and regenerative farming practices. So that, in a nutshell, is why we need to think about nature positive and some of the things we need to do. But this obviously isn't going to happen without some thought and effort. And in practice, it means companies are going to have to put some effort into planning and monitoring what they're going to do with nature. Now, there's a lot of guidance out there on this subject, ranging from the Science Based Targets Network to the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, to the IUCN guidelines that I also helped to develop myself. But they all basically say the same things. Companies need to look at the pressures and dependencies on nature, develop sound, scientifically based goals and targets on what they aspire to achieve, and then work with whichever clients, stakeholders, and partners are necessary and relevant to deliver those commitments. And last but certainly not least, they need to monitor progress, because monitoring and disclosing progress is essential, and failure to do so basically opens up companies to accusations of greenwashing. But if goals are set properly, suitable indicators can be identified and measured, and we have a lot of experience of doing that. So to conclude, I'd say, I won't pretend this is going to be easy. Many companies I talk to still find nature and biodiversity very confusing, even quite overwhelming. But if companies do take even simple steps to unpack what nature means to them and identify what they can do in their operations and supply chains, then they can help turn the tide of nature loss and turn it into nature positive. So that's where I'll stop now.
Thank you very much, PJ. It's great. You have basically touched in 5 minutes all the key themes that we will discuss today. And I'm sure that both myself and the audience will ask a lot of questions about what you talked about. In particular, the crucial interdependence of nature inside all levels of the value chains for businesses, and how, like, moving forward and creating this new market, as Toral will also touch upon later, it's crucial to really be able to measure, monitor, disclose transparently in a science-based manner all of the benefits and transparently communicate them. Thank you very much. And the next is Davey Richerson. Thank you for joining us. Davey has been seconded by Business for Nature from Accenture's Talent and Organization Practice to serve as a business action strategy advisor. Davey supports the Business for Nature coalition on the business action work stream across a variety of initiatives, including the integration of Get Nature Positive and their handbook into the Business Action Network. So today, Davey will help us bring clarity on how this global coalition is steering the work on Nature Positive, and what really is the business case for Nature Positive. PJ already touched on this, but it's interesting to get also the perspective of the coalition on this, and how that is basically happening in practice. And finally, how Nature Positive efforts basically augment the efforts that are already being made towards net zero. So Davey, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thanks, Giacomo. And, we're definitely excited to be part of this conversation and are thankful that you put together a webinar on, as PJ has already talked about, an incredibly important topic, and something that I think that obviously more and more people, both at a government level and a corporate level, it's moving higher up the agenda, and definitely something of great interest. So for those of you that don't know, Business for Nature is a global coalition that aims to drive credible business action and policy ambition to achieve a nature positive economy for all by 2030. So we work with actually more than 80 international and national partners and a diverse group of businesses from all sectors, sizes, and geographies to call for that policy ambition and encourage companies to assess, commit, transform, and disclose on nature. Over the next few minutes, as Giacomo said, I'm going to highlight just how our coalition of partners is working collaboratively to support business and financial institutions as they work towards a nature-positive future, why businesses should act now to contribute to the shared goal of a nature-positive planet by 2030, and, as mentioned, the importance of tackling both the climate and nature crises simultaneously. So to begin, it's important to note, as PJ noted, that everything we value and depend on in life, food, security, health, a stable climate, relies on nature. And therefore, so does business. And despite the fact, often nature-related dependencies are not considered because they don't feature on the balance sheet or a profit and loss statement. But the fact that we're losing nature at an unprecedented rate presents a material risk for companies. But on the other hand, it also presents an opportunity to innovate, transform, and contribute to being part of the solution rather than the problem. And while the above has been true for quite a while, the historic Global Biodiversity Framework, or GBF, agreed at COP15 in Montreal this past December, has set a new direction for the world's relationship with nature. It is, if you'd like, nature's Paris moment, providing a common goal and path forward and framework for all of us to work toward. So COP15 has truly significantly raised the level of ambition on the actions businesses will need to take to help deliver the framework's central mission to halt and reverse nature loss by 2030. With higher levels of ambition, this also means that there's now a need for us to provide higher levels of support for businesses they seek to understand how they can contribute to this nature-positive future. And that's where we come in as a coalition. Collectively, we're working to support business as they seek to speed up and scale action on nature and comply with what was agreed in the GBF, specifically their obligations in relation to Target 15, which is where all large businesses and financial institutions will be required to assess and disclose their risks, impacts, and dependencies on biodiversity and nature. A few examples of how we've supported business to date by strengthening, clarifying, and amplifying why and how companies should act include developing high-level business actions to offer a simple framework for companies to assess, commit, transform, and disclose their impacts on nature, leading the creation of a discussion paper on what nature positive means, and sharing how business and financial institutions can credibly contribute to that nature positive world, and providing further clarity to the outcomes of the GBF and supporting national governments as they work to implement the GBF in each of their respective countries. So as we also talked about, why should businesses act now? What other incentives are there that businesses need to act now? One reason is that social norms and expectations of businesses are evolving, and CEOs and boards must focus on how to actually ensure the resilience of their company in the long term, both from the potential future regulation and legal frameworks already mentioned as part of the GBF, and the rapidly shifting expectations of consumers and investors for nature-positive products and supply and value chains. Another reason is that it really just makes sense for the bottom line, especially for those businesses that are willing to take bold actions. Research has found that business investments in nature could create up to 395 million jobs by 2030, and that could be an annual opportunity of around 700 billion for businesses to reduce operating costs while benefiting nature. So, as I said, definitely makes sense for the bottom line as well. And, it won't be easy, as also mentioned already, to convince every company to start their transformation journey sooner rather than later. But luckily, the research is on our side and provides that clear business case for investing in nature-positive changes, as it truly could be one of the most profitable and impactful investments a company ever makes. Finally, for those who excuse their lack of action on nature and biodiversity-related issues due to their ongoing commitments and actions on climate, we would really challenge those underlying assumptions they are making to justify their inaction. The climate and nature crises are interconnected, and we can't address them in silos. In fact, we cannot stabilize the climate without reversing nature loss. For example, nature has absorbed more than half of human-related carbon emissions over the last decade. It simply is our best ally in preventing climate breakdown. Just as we would not assess our overall health on, say, just blood pressure alone, we need to assess and look after the health of our planet in many ways. Just like the human body, biodiversity is complex. We must look to be part of the broader solution rather than viewing the dual crises in separation and allocating resources to one or the other. Our overall planetary health depends on us solving both of these crises simultaneously. In summary, as also mentioned, the topic of how we collectively work towards a nature-positive future is quite complex, but it really is a collaborative fight for us to save our planet together. The interconnected challenges we face require collaborative solutions, innovations, finance, technology, and business is uniquely positioned to move fast and find solutions. So to be clear, the scale of the challenge means we need businesses of every size from every sector and geography to step up and have courage. No one's being asked to solve this alone, but every one of us is being asked to contribute. So either we all reach a nature positive world by 2030 or none of us will. So it's the ultimate joint effort for both nature and humanity.
Thank you, Davey. That was really helpful to really understand the steps that takes for a business to really commit and start acting on nature positive. So measuring, disclosing, committing, reporting regularly. Like these are all key steps to ensure that the process that PJ was talking about actually is implemented. And I totally agree with you that it should be also seen by businesses as an opportunity rather than a duty, like besides a duty. And how that also translates into business, benefits such as showing themselves as innovators and increasing resilience of the business. So Toral actually will help us add more context on how that is happening in a practical way and how we are already building the structures needed to scale investment in nature. Toral has a background in plant taxonomy and evolutionary biology with a focus on East Africa, and she's the biodiversity coordinator at the Plan Vivo Foundation, a partner of Earthly, who is leading the development of a new biodiversity certification scheme. Toral will help us understand the role of nature credits, which is this new framework developed by Plan Vivo within this movement of nature positive businesses, and also how Plan Vivo more generally is incentivizing landowners and communities to conserve and restore habitats across the world through this new framework of Plan Vivo nature credits. So Toral, welcome and happy to have you with us.
Thanks, Giacomo. Yeah, really happy to be here today. I think I'll start by introducing Plan Vivo a little bit. So Plan Vivo is a charitable foundation and also a voluntary carbon certification body with over 25 years experience in the sector. And our model is quite unique because we focus on supporting smallholders and climate sensitive communities by really putting them at the forefront of the project design. And so by ensuring this participatory process, we're really able to empower them to develop sustainable land use projects. So that's kind of Plan Vivo in a nutshell. But what is the role of nature credits or biodiversity certificates, as Plan Vivo are calling them, in this nature positive movement? So we really believe that biodiversity certificates are a key opportunity to channel responsible investment into biodiversity restoration and conservation, but by really rewarding the efforts of this work to the nature's custodians for doing this. I think biodiversity credits can serve as a key instrument to finance activities that result in measurable positive change for biodiversity, but with those key right principles in place, it could have the ability to really scale up and potentially quite rapidly. So biodiversity credits could also provide an opportunity to shift the mindset of businesses or investors on how they perceive or view nature, with this aim to go above and beyond just do no harm, but actually into this nature positive movement. And so by framing these credits in a very holistic manner, recognizing that you cannot address climate impact without biodiversity or the people involved or vice versa, is really key to be able to drive this movement forward. So at Plan Vivo, over the last year and a half, we've been scoping and developing a standalone new biodiversity certification called PV Nature. And we're really using our work in the voluntary carbon market to build on the lessons learned and deliver a biodiversity standard that produces biodiversity benefits that are real, additional, and verifiable, things that PJ and Davey already spoke about. But PV Nature is fully aligned with our core values, and that is, as I mentioned, ensuring that our projects are holistic, so they have a holistic impact not only for nature, but for climate and communities, and are very much based on a participatory approach, ensuring a transparent, equitable benefit sharing mechanism is delivered for these communities. So Plan Vivo are actually the only carbon standard to have a benefit sharing mechanism that channels at least 60% of the finance from the sale of these credits directly back to the communities. And this is a core value that we want and we will be carrying forward to our new biodiversity standard. The aim here is really to reward and incentivize these communities to make these sustainable land use choices on their own. And in addition to that benefit sharing mechanism, we also want to ensure all our projects conduct thorough stakeholder consultation processes, which allows them to articulate where the biodiversity lies in their own land. And in turn, that allows us to better track and monitor when it comes to biodiversity impact that is not just contributing to environmental benefits, but has long-standing socioeconomic benefits too. So ultimately, we want to incentivize landowners to engage in this initiative, not just for rewarding them, but creating project benefits or livelihood benefits that go beyond the project lifetime and result in resilient communities throughout. So at the moment, it's understanding where this fits both from a biodiversity credit side and on the ground.
Fantastic. Toral, we will definitely ask you a lot of questions on that later on. I'm personally very excited about the upcoming release of this framework, and it's really a great opportunity to hear from you the work that Plan Vivo has already done as the leader, really, in addressing the issue that I introduced this this conversation with, so the biodiversity and community issues of the carbon market, and how you're really leading and creating this new market on incorporating these best practices from the start so that this can really take on a really good direction. So then the next speaker is Laura Rudoe, who set up Good Ventures in 2008 as an ethical development company with the mission for good. Under her Good Ventures umbrella, Laura has created 2 natural beauty brands, Evolve Organic Beauty and Adaptology. Laura is also a vital member of our customer advisory board, who provides feedback on the customer experience and the investment, the process of investing in nature. So Laura will help us understand how nature positive targets basically fit into a realistic sustainability strategy, and basically the first steps to engage in this process, and the business benefits that she's experienced from achieving both net zero and nature positive as a business.
Hi everyone. Are you guys able to drive my slides and move me to my first slide, please, if possible? Thank you. So what I thought I would do is I thought I could share the framework that we use when we think about both our overall strategy as well as our sustainability strategy. So when I set up my business, I wanted to create business as a force for good. So back in 2009, when I launched my first brand, Evolve Organic Beauty, I was already working towards making my brand organic, certified organic, as well as using lots of recycled packaging. And we've really been on a journey over the time I've had the brand since then, and then we launched a second brand as well, towards trying to create a business that gives back. And what we've started talking about recently is trying to create a regenerative business, which I think is very similar to what you're defining as nature positive. So really a business that holistically works across a number of different sort of areas to try and give back to nature. And we divide our impact into 5 main areas. So for us, championing organic and natural is really important. When I started the brand, I was thinking more about people's own health and not wanting to damage people's hormones and sort of bodies with synthetic chemicals. But going sort of forward and learning more and educating myself about regenerative agriculture, I've realized how important organic and natural is for the soil, as well as for people. So that's one of the key things that we do. And our brand, Evolve Organic Beauty, is certified organic and natural with Cosmos, as is our other brand, Adaptology. And then we also have really tried to focus on other ways we can become regenerative. So with biodiversity, with organic and natural ingredients in beauty, we do use lots of ingredients from nature. So we need to think about how those are harvested and what the impact of those are. So we're trying to make sure that we're buying ingredients that help to improve soil health, and that we're not buying ingredients which might be damaging. So we've just ensured that all of our palm oil is regenerative, for example, or sustainably sourced. And that's really important to us. When it comes to carbon, we're really obviously trying to aim towards zero carbon, and that's a really ambitious and big target. We became carbon neutral working with Earthly a couple of years ago. We've done our carbon mapping, and we've done offset. And then this past year, we've also committed to a net zero target to reduce our carbon by 50% by 2030 and 90% by 2050. And so we're working on that big project, looking at how we can find lower impact materials that can reduce our carbon, and also how we can really look at our supply chain to try and reduce our carbon. It's a lot of the carbon is in the scope 3 emissions, which a lot come from sourcing cosmetic ingredients from all over the world, and particularly on how those are transported to us. So there are savings we can make in that area, which we're working on. We've also done quite a lot of work on trying to reduce our waste footprint as well as our carbon footprint. So we're plastic neutral, and we also have looked to try and find really low impact waste materials, plastic packaging materials, which have a lower waste footprint. So we use recycled plastic and also grass paper cartons in our Evolve range, which have a much lower footprint, and they're compostable. And the fifth sort of pillar that we have is Kind to All, which includes our vegan and our cruelty-free certifications, as well as the fact that we are a living wage employer, which means that our team, who are based in the UK, who work out of our eco studio in Hertfordshire, are paid fairly, and their hours are fair. So it's a bit of a snapshot. Overall, we're trying to be a force for good. We've just become a B corporation, and we believe that this is the right way to do business, and it makes business sense, as well as sort of sense from a heart as well as from a head, I guess. So that's a kind of a snapshot of the work that we're doing. I think I might have put one more slide in there, which is just to say that when we think about our impact, we think about the full length of the impact, which is probably obvious from what I was saying about the scope 3 emissions, but from wherever the ingredients were grown, how they're farmed and transported to our studio, and then also how they're then used and hopefully then recycled or upcycled at the end of their life. So we're looking at the whole of that impact when we're thinking about our sustainability strategy and our impact pillars. That's a bit of a summary from me.
Thank you very much, Laura. Yeah, I think Laura's businesses are a great example of what the businesses that Earthly loves to collaborate with, because you really espouse our same holistic approach to investment in nature. You look at all the different aspects of sustainability, including also the social and people aspect of sustainability, which is often maybe considered in silo in some cases. And actually cosmetics is the perfect example of what PJ was talking about at the beginning of how like supply chains are inextricably connected to nature, and cosmetics is a really good example of how this relation goes both ways, because it's both you giving back to the soils to keep them rich and able to produce your ingredients, but also them giving back to you the quality that you can then communicate to your customers, which is great. And the other thing that you touched upon, which hasn't been touched yet actually in this seminar, but it's extremely important, is your focus on reduction actually, and how you are collaborating with Earthly, not just to offset your footprint, but also to really reduce it, and to work on these two tracks at the same time and have a strategy in place, which is what Davey is also helping businesses achieve, basically really having that long-term trajectories ready. So I think we can now open to panel questions to the panel from the. So we have the first question, maybe for Laura, since we've just talked about your business. The first question is, what have you found to be the biggest challenge when trying to lead the way in sustainable business? So maybe initial challenges and how you overcame them.
One of the biggest challenges is to collect data on all of the different ingredients and it's just sort of the data points that we're trying to collect. So we have over 180 different ingredients, and we're trying to get data on them from our distributors who don't always have very good data. And it's very expensive to do the carbon mapping. And even more than that, we'd like to have more ethical mapping on where the ingredients came from, the labour conditions. We've managed to screen out particular areas we know are problematic, like the mica supply chain, for example. But across the board, we'd really love to have much better data to be able to make better decisions and choose the lowest impact ingredients. And what I'm trying to work on with others in the beauty industry is an open source database with ingredient information, which needs to be done at a product and supplier level to have the right level of information. This exists in the fashion industry. It's called the HIG index. And I'm talking to a number of different larger beauty brands than me who've done a lot of work on mapping, because I think if we could bring our information together, it would help a lot of smaller businesses and big ones too, who haven't gone down this journey yet, make better decisions. And I think that most people will make good decisions if they have the information. But there's a lot of sort of inefficiencies in every single beauty business going to every single supplier to collect the same data again and again. So that's one of the things that I think is a pain point that could be easily reduced, because it's expensive otherwise for a small brand like us to collect all of this.
That's really important and useful insights for all of our listeners as well, that I hope will go through a similar journey. And I'm sure that the work that Davey is doing will also aim to help people in this journey of collecting data and knowing really how to navigate these early stages of reporting. So the next questions are both for Toral, actually. So the first question is quite detailed about safeguards, and so they're asking, since you have such a strong focus and you're really the only framework in the world taking such care and being so strict about benefit sharing, the question is whether you have safeguards in place to direct and control how that cash compensations are being used. And basically, yeah, so that's the first part of the question. And the second one is if whether proceeds need to go back into the management of crediting actions.
Sure, yeah. So yes, we do have quite robust environmental and social safeguards embedded within the standard that projects have to comply with. But for the 60% that goes back to the community, we don't prescribe what that needs to be used for. What we do need to see is that it was communally decided upon through an inclusive stakeholder engagement process, and that those benefits are indeed what the community want that money to be used for. The 40% usually does go back into project management and administration. But again, that's up to how the project manages their finances. What we want to see is it's very open, transparent, and inclusive.
Fantastic.
That answers your question.
And there was another question on the data you collect and in terms of ecosystem services within the nature standard.
Yeah,
like
so
that you're looking at basically.
Yeah, so we're looking to find a good balance between having like a good biodiversity monitoring strategy, as well as integrating community biodiversity value and indigenous knowledge into the whole monitoring aspect. So in terms of the type of metrics we're looking for things that indicate on ecosystem services like water quality or soil quality, but also vegetation cover, and also increase in and diversity of different species or different taxonomic groups. So we're trying to find an all-encompassing approach that is still scientifically robust, but not too complicated or expensive to implement and communicate.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm sure that you have a lot of useful information available on the website. I just wanted to flag to people listening that if you go on the Plan Vivo website, you can find the sort of documents outlining basically how they're planning to implement this framework, and it's very interesting, and there's opportunity to influence sorts of the process through consultations. So please go and have a look. The next question is for the panel in general and to Ollie specifically. We have the CEO of Ground Up Conservation asking, basically, we've talked about the interdependency of business and nature ecosystems, but there are some cases in which there's a less maybe clear or direct link between supply chains and ecosystems, but that's not necessarily a reason for not investing in those ecosystems. So how do we really bring investment in areas where it is difficult to establish such direct links, such as the Himalayan landscapes? And linked to that, what are some examples of projects that Earthly is supporting that maybe are an example of that?
Happy to jump in on that. So we really specialize in bringing out the values and the strengths from unique nature-based projects. And so, we like to think that we're helping connect businesses to the most impactful nature-based projects, regardless of where they are in the world. An example of that is with a client recently that really wanted to focus on female empowerment. So we specifically built them a portfolio of nature-based projects that over-indexed on female empowerment. And so, typically clients come to us and they have a geographical focus and a value focus, and then we combine both of those points to build a bespoke portfolio of projects for them. Some of the projects on our marketplace at the moment range from agroforestry to mangrove restoration to peatland protection restoration. And then, we also support innovation. So in the UK, one example is a kelp project with bioalgae. And typically we find that customers, they might want to have a % of their portfolio, which is sort of approved, verified credits that can be used to, a net zero or a nature positive contribution. But then also they want to have a smaller amount supporting innovation. And that's something that we're really keen to push as well, to support those newer, more kind of, exciting, innovative projects.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ollie. Then the next question is for PJ and Davey from Carolina, asking, about specific example of science-aligned goals for nature that would be relevant for SMEs. And actually, I think that here, what Laura was saying is also relevant, and the experience she had with Earthly is a good example of how she started off offsetting, and then she sort of made that more complex by integrating more steps on reduction and engagement with the whole of the supply chain, and then becoming a leader on that. So maybe Laura can also contribute to that. So yeah, happy for either of you guys to jump in and answer.
Well, yeah, happy to. I mean, I think the key thing to keep in mind here, there's no simple answer. And this is, I mean, often when it comes to businesses and biodiversity, people want a quick answer. They want, what is a goal I should have? What is the one metric that will tell everybody I'm doing well? And it's, unfortunately, biodiversity isn't that simple, right? And it's a reality that we've got to live with. But I would just say that the essential bit is that whatever your company does, is you spend a bit of time unpacking what biodiversity means for you. So where does the rubber hit the road in terms of your operations and supply chains? And I appreciate certain sectors, it's more obvious than others, agriculture being one of the most obvious. And others, if you're, I don't know, into tech or IT or something, or business services or banking, it might be less obvious, but you need to unpack where you're investing, where your supply chains are from, and then just see, well, what would be relevant for us? Where could we, in those areas, at least make a bit of an effort to try and come out of it with nature better off than it was before? And again, and if you have absolutely no link in your own supply chains, then that's where I think you need to start looking at, well, how can you invest in projects elsewhere, including in the Himalayas or wherever else, where you could help contribute to Net Plus there.
Yeah, I think what I would add is I think it's important to understand what your impact is, and to try and minimize the negative impacts and look at how you can maximize what you're doing for the positive. I think that I always like to find win-win. So if there's a way of me buying ingredients that are going to be better for nature, we buy a regenerative ingredient from the Kalahari Desert called Kalahari melon seed oil. And it's a lovely ingredient. Customers love hearing the stories of where it comes from. It helps to regenerate the soil in those areas which are desert. And then it also has a lovely impact on the jobs in those areas. So I can do something I was going to buy anyway, and it can have more benefits. And I'm always looking for win-wins like that in my supply chain, where I can actually use my buying and, you know, my actual economic power to be a force for good. And I think that that's always the most powerful, because then if you build that goodness inside your products, you don't have this conflict anymore about, you know, doing good and doing well. You can actually do good whilst you're economically more profitable. So wherever you can find those win-wins, I would encourage you to try and go after them first.
And I'll just quickly add that there's a couple of tools already out there that you can at least start to think about what are some targets that may be coming up. So SBTN, Science-Based Targets Networks, actually already has some interim targets that you can at least look and see where their head is in terms of what impacts on nature could be. But as PJ and Laura said, it really depends on the sector, your own personal business, and unpacking what that actually means for you. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, or Giacomo did, is sectoral guidance. So some of the work that we're doing as a coalition with Business for Nature alongside the WEF and WBCSD is actually coming up with sectoral guidance for companies in a specific sector on what are my main kind of dependencies and impacts on nature, and then what are the top 5-6 actions that we can take as an industry and or company within that industry and sector to actually make a difference towards a nature positive economy. So hopefully by September, October time this year, we'll be launching that on our website. So more to come there, but those tools are coming to help you with this specific question.
Fantastic. Thank you for the very comprehensive reply. It's always helpful to have a different spread of expertise in these panels so that you can answer on such broad basis. Now we have two questions and a partial answer, actually. So both Hugo and David would like to expand on what Laura was touching on. Unfortunately, I'm aware that we only have 3 minutes left, but this is probably the most important of all the challenges we have for the coming years, is basically how to really align on addressing these value chain questions that you mentioned. So especially in a super globalized world like today, it's like even governments are failing to really account for carbon, which is much easier to account for in terms of metrics. How are we going to address the complexity of biodiversity, especially when we are going to aim for a biodiversity net gain rather than just contribution that are unlinked to companies' footprints? So this is for the panel at large. If anyone would like to contribute on the timelines that we might see in finding frameworks to disclose biodiversity impacts. And
I was just going to add, the one thing that gives me hope is we have the EU Digital Product Passport legislation coming in, where you have to essentially show where all the raw materials in a product have come from and have full provenance. And so, you know, that's coming in the not too distant future. And so it's not a wild, you know, step to start to imagine that there'll be, you know, required reporting on the nature footprint of specific raw materials and, you know, the effects on biodiversity. So I think I can see stuff moving quite quickly over the next couple of years.
And I wanted to also comment that while obviously reporting your footprint is an extremely complex matter, the work that Plan Vivo Nature is doing actually allows for businesses to start investing in nature even before having that complex and complete understanding of the footprint. Obviously, in order to avoid greenwashing, there's clear guidance to be followed on what claims can be made, but basically a positive impact can be had even before these policies and on reporting are mature. And
I can add something there if you like, Giacomo.
Yes.
Just around high integrity, which is something Plan Vivo are really keen on, and also working with other organizations such as World Economic Forum and the Biodiversity Credit Alliance, spearheaded by UNDP. So we're really focused on trying to define what high integrity looks like. And we also did quite a bit of work with Fauna and Flora International. So you can look up that on our website. But it's really trying to ensure that there is transparency and accountability, but also maintaining access to these markets for communities and engaging responsible actors to be the buyers and investors of these credits. So I think in the upcoming future, high integrity is quite high on the agenda. And I think once those guidelines are in place, then we can really see this market take off.
Fantastic. Thank you, Toral. So we've reached the end of this conversation. We've had a run through all of the different stages of Nature Positive, what it is, and why is it relevant for businesses, the interdependence that PJ described of businesses and value chains. We had Laura, who brought an excellent example of that. We had Toral to explain basically how we are operationalizing that at the moment to kick off those initial investment in nature, and Oliver also here with Earthly to help businesses understand their impact and take the first steps in that journey, and Davey to really help us reach scale and really guide and construct solid alliances to do this together and understand what it takes. So thank you very much. And although we would love to have more questions, please email us with further questions, and we would be happy to answer. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks for joining, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.